House of the Dragon, Episode 8, The Lord of the Tides. One of the best episodes in not only House of the Dragon, but also all of Game of Thrones. The writing and the performances were sensational, especially Paddy Considine as King Viserys. Give him an Emmy for his portrayal, not only in this episode, but throughout the entire season. He has always been consistently one, if not the best actor on this show. And this episode was the peak. He is trying to secure his legacy and pass on Aegon's dream, but also what's most dear to him, repair a broken family. And it truly was difficult to watch his decay, especially if you had someone in your own life who went through a very similar situation. Of course, I'll give you guys a spoiler warning, but you've all seen the episode by now. I know this video is late, but I'm back at work now and I am struggling to find time to get these videos out. But here we are, episode 8, and I believe it was 6 years after the last one. And this is the final large time jump. Of course, we do want to see the events that happen between the years, but if I'm being honest, they are unnecessary. What we are seeing on screen is what is crucial to this series, and I think they've handled the time jumps remarkably well. This could have been the point where it drops off, but in fact the opposite happened. It keeps getting better. Episode 6 was good, episode 7 was better, episode 8 is even better than that. Alicent and Rhaenyra's kids are all grown up now, the permanent actors are in place, everyone was solid, but I think Viserys overshadows everyone. He was the MVP of this episode, and rightfully so. From reuniting with Rhaenyra and meeting his grandkids for the first time, a grandson named after his grandsire. That was a bit of a tearjerker. And then of course taking his place on the Iron Throne and defending his daughter and her children's claims for not only Driftmark, but also in a way the Iron Throne. If Vaemond got Driftmark, he would be in the Green's pocket, and they would use this to devalue Rhaenyra's claim. But in the end, Viserys puts the matter to a close, because in his eyes, this should never have been brought before him. But even in his current state, he still commands the respect as king, and his voice is law. I know he hasn't been a perfect king, we're not arguing that, but he's always tried to do what's best for the realm and his family. We could argue he may have acted sooner and more decisively in matters in the past, but in his last hours, he done everything he could as a father and a king to support his favourite child, because I don't think there's any question Rhaenyra is Viserys' favourite. She is Aemma's daughter, Viserys' one true love that he never got over. He does love his other kids, and I do wish we got to see more of him and them together, but Rhaenyra was always his number one. And we could argue that kind of makes Viserys a crappy father, but we have to remember him and pretty much every other character in this series, in Game of Thrones, and A Song of Ice and Fire in general, is flawed, and that's what makes them so real. And I think Viserys will be remembered as one of the best. And he is a perfect example of an on-screen adaptation by a top quality actor far exceeding what was written on page. Even George R. Martin admits this, and I think that is a major, major compliment. It was the final dinner with Viserys' family where I started to get really teary. Viserys got to see his family get along just for a few minutes before having to retire to his deathbed. Of course, it all kicks off once he goes, once a few jokes are made, once the pig is brought out, once the strong boys are mentioned. But I think what is most upsetting for me is Viserys died thinking he managed to create peace within his house. And in his final moments, he once again tells Rhaenyra the importance of Aegon the Conqueror's dream. But at this point, he is completely out of it. He's in tremendous pain. He's drugged up on the milk of the puppy. He is dying. So he thinks it's Rhaenyra he's talking to, but it's actually Alicent. And now she believes Viserys wants Aegon to be king, and there is a prophetic meaning behind him, ascending to the Iron Throne. I don't think this is the sole reason Alicent acts the way she does after Viserys' death, but it has to be a considerable factor. And of course, episode 9 is next week, and we know episode 9s in a season are infamous in Game of Thrones. Either something very bad happens, or we get a major event like a battle. I won't spoil it for you, but remember, episode 8 shows us we have to take Fire and Blood with a grain of salt. Events happen differently because we're actually witnessing them, instead of being told for a biased account. And of course, stuff changes because it's for television, for dramatic effect, for screenplay, and remember, what works on page doesn't always work on screen, as I always say. But for me, episode 8, hands down the best episode in House of the Dragon, and it has to be up there with the all-time greats in Game of Thrones. Even when it was at its best in the first 4 seasons, or even episodes like Hardhome, Battle of the Bastards, The Winds of Winter. But yes, this is definitely the best thing I've seen all year on television. Before this show aired, there was so much talk about whether it could redeem Season 8, and about all the other fantasy shows becoming the next Game of Thrones. Turns out, House of the Dragon far exceeds what we could have imagined, and it was the next Game of Thrones. And George R. Martin's already talked about 4 seasons of 10 episodes. Take that with a grain of salt. I think that might be a bit too much. Maybe 3 seasons is enough. But give me Aegon's conquest, Maegor the Cruel, and everything that leads up to Viserys in the Great Council of 101. And of course, everything after the Dance of the Dragons, the Blackfire Rebellions, all the way to Daenerys being smuggled out of Dragonstone in Robert's Rebellion. Honestly, I can't praise this episode enough, and there's far too much to discuss. We could possibly argue the Greens are being made out as clear villains, and the Blacks are the good guys, but I don't think that's how it's going to work by the end of it. A lot of bad stuff is going to happen in this war, and it's going to turn even the most pure of hearts sour. So far, Rhaenyra has been the main character, and most of the first season revolves around her story in becoming heir and now claiming her birthright. But book readers know what awaits her, and know how it can change a person. And Daemon is one bad day away from committing some terrible deeds. This is not good versus bad guys, even if it looks that way right now. Trust me, by the end of this, you will be doubting yourself and the characters you held in such high regard, just as you done in Game of Thrones, and that's what makes this series so good. But of course, I want you guys to post your thoughts about episode 8, tell me your favourite moment, but I think most of us agree this is one, if not the best episode so far. Viserys stole the show, but Alicent and Rhaenyra were never far behind. Daemon is Daemon. Aemond wants to be his uncle, but even with a bigger dragon and a more twisted personality. Aegon is a horrible person, and Helaena is stuck in the middle of all of it. And I'm glad we got to see more out of Helaena, rather than her just mumbling a few words of prophecy or future events. Of course, there is still a lot left to desire, but I think once both sides state their claims and 2 distinct factions are established, then we can give more screen time and character development to secondary characters. And I'm totally fine if Alicent, Rhaenyra, and Daemon take a back seat every once in a while so others can shine. But I think that'll do for today. Of course, we'll cover episode 9 next week as soon as I can. But before that, we have the finale for Rings of Power Season 1, where the Dark Lord Sauron will reveal himself. I know that show hasn't been perfect so far. Far from it. I have a lot of criticism, but I am excited to finally see what happens in the finale. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.